Hello. Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Reese, the organizer of tonight's event. Thank you all so much for coming to ONX. ONX is a studio and exhibition space made in partnership with the New Museum, New Ink, and Onassis Foundation, and it focuses on extended reality. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that Onassis and the New Museum sit on unceded indigenous land, specifically the homeland of the Lenape peoples. We acknowledge the genocide and continued displacement of indigenous peoples during the colonial era and beyond. Again, thank you all so much for coming. On behalf of ONX and New Ink and the Onassis Foundation, I'd like to welcome you to the inaugural ONX Artist Series with Meriem Bennani and Taja. I'm so grateful to have Taja and Meriem here, and I feel very lucky to call them both friends. I've been an enormous admirer of their work for many years, and I'm sure many of you here tonight are familiar with their practice, but I'll take a minute to acknowledge their work. Brooklyn-born and based experimentalist and multi-instrumentalist Taja, aka Lorraine, is mapping the enormity of how to change. Her second album, Fatigue, demands introspection from ready ears. With an array of keyboards, synths, and hauntingly delicate vocals, they create a genre entirely of her own. Cheek has dipped her toes in every corner of the arts through her work at some of the most prestigious art institutions in New York, and collaborations with the likes of Namat Zabar, Kevin Beasley, Justin Allen, and others in the contemporary arts. Meriem Bennani lives and works in Brooklyn, New York. Juxtaposing and mixing the language of reality TV, documentaries, phone footage, animation, and high production aesthetics, she explores the potential of storytelling while amplifying reality through a strategy of magical realism and humor. She has been developing a shape-shifting practice of films, sculptures, and immersive installations, composed with a subtle agility to question our contemporary society and its fractured identities, gender issues, and ubiquitous dominance of digital technologies. Bennani's work has been shown at the Whitney Biennale, MoMA PS1, the Guggenheim Museum, Art Dubai, the Vuitton Foundation in Paris, Public Art Fund, Clearing, and the Kitchen in New York. At the end of the conversation, we'll open up to the audience for questions, so please have them ready. But for now, I'd like to welcome Meriem and Taja to the front.
Hi. Hi. Thanks for having us for the first conversation.
Yeah, I think we've known each other for a while, but we haven't actually really been able to dive into our work together and chat. So it's been really great. We've been talking for weeks, just trying to find entry points into each other's work and where it converges and diverges. So yeah, this is the result of those conversations.
Yeah, and we wanted it to be kind of casual conversation. We have some structure, but really we're just gonna be chatting.
I want to talk with you guys.
Exactly. Yeah. I have a nerdy question. If you're in the back, would you be able to see the bottom of the screen? Okay. There's subtitles I was worried about. Yeah. Okay, so maybe we start.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, cool. So our first category is collaging and repurposing. I think that's the first thing we thought about. I mean, both for each other. Before we even started talking, when I listened to your music, I was like, oh, there's something so similar to what I do in video. Yeah. And I think it's this is the starting point of what's similar. Yeah. And maybe we can start. Do you want to play this before, or do you want to talk about it before?
Oh yeah, let's play.
Okay.
lot of that. I think that's actually Salome singing at the beginning.
It's Salome?
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, when we were first talking, I was just thinking about my process and how I use voice memos as the kind of source material for my work. Really because I have a horrible memory. So I try to just record moments like these, my birthday a while ago, or people passing by on the street, or something that I want to remember more intently, and I use them. I think there's another audio recording that I'll come back that'll kind of show how this was used in another track. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's just an example of like the sort of things that I'm capturing and using and eventually repurposing later.
Yeah, and so we were talking a lot about that, like just like as a starting point, how recording things that come to us, like that there's like our research, like things that we go look for inspiration, and then things that just come to you, and this kind of like practice that maybe in music is called sampling, but I'm like, oh, that's documentary. It's kind of the same idea.
Yeah, it's exactly
and
the same.
Realizing our interest in for both of us in that collage of like things that come to you element. And I was like, wait, I do something similar. I take photos and then I like with my phone, and then I go back to them to build things in my videos. So I'll show you an example from my last film. It's called Life on the Gaps. And so like on the left you have photos that I take with my iPhone, and then like an animation sequence that's based on the photo. I'll show more, and then I'll show you how the sequence looks.
سيدي كوكي واحد المدينة شاطئية على الساحل المحيط الأطلسي ديال المغرب في الكبرو وليدية. فاش الريح كيضرب في الغرب الكليان ديال زكات لهم الميساج تونايت. أحسن فرصة الليلة تيليبورتيشن كتبقى غاشية ما تقلب، كيخصك تكون واجد باش تمشي.
We can move forward, but I want to ask you questions.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like how does it work for you? Do you like record stuff because you know you're gonna make something out of it, or do you just record a lot and then go back and you know what I mean?
Yeah. I never really record knowing what's gonna happen with it, and even now, I kind of naively I'm like, this isn't gonna go into the work. It's just for me, but there's always kind of a chance of it. It feels like it's maybe more pointed for you, like you kind of know you may be using it, or?
No, I take photos and videos out of the pleasure of taking them because I see something, but then they come in handy. So
yeah, exactly.
I feel like there's only so much you can do out of memory because you kind of like repeat yourself out of memory. Like there's what you know, and then like I look back at a photo that I took, I think I saw every detail, but then if I reproduce it in the 3D program, I spend like hours looking at it, and there's details I could never come up with. And I think like that makes me think about like just like what comes from you in terms of like a creative person, and then things you bring in from the outside that you would never think of, and that diversity, I feel like it's kind of like in both our work. I mean, I don't want
definitely.
to
no, I really relate to that so much. Yeah.
So speaking of that.
Oh yeah. You were talking about like reversing and different ways that we're repurposing these things that we collect to remember, and I kind of want to go through like the process of reversing stuff. So this was something I wrote a while ago. You can play like very little of that because it's embarrassing.
Something weird.
Yeah, something weird happened.
Don't worry about it. Super chill.
I think the computer sensed my embarrassment. It's helping me out.
I hope I didn't mess things up
Oh, I don't think so.
All right, let's see.
I think it was so. It's okay.
So let's try again.
Yeah.
I mean, I messed things up.
No, it's good. It's good. It's great.
Let's try the second one.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Okay, so I'm gonna I don't like to break the perfectness of the PowerPoint, but I'm gonna go into the Finder and find the track.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So do you want to tell us where we're gonna?
Yeah. So the first audio clip is just a demo of a song that, wasn't really working for me, and I didn't know what to do with it. And so I reversed it. And then the second audio clip is the song reversed, and then the third is it being incorporated into a song as sort of like the basis I used for writing on top of it. Just to kind of give some insight into what happens to these things I have and have collected. Yeah.
Till the night becomes the day.
And then the next sample
is that reversed, which I thought was much more interesting. Oh, wait.
I think I figured it out.
Okay.
Is that they all play at the same time because they're on the same page, and so that's gonna keep happening.
Oh, I see. That's kind of fun, though.
Yeah, I know it feels like
How
very
things
on
can be.
topic.
Yeah, it is.
But do you want me to go back to Finder?
You know what? Maybe just play. Yeah, maybe the.
I kind of want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was not the plan. So this is the final track.
Yeah.
Alone. Yeah.
Playing together. I'm like, oh, that's
Wait, are they still playing together?
A little bit,
But
but
you're so
I like
polite.
it.
You're not telling me. Wait, I'm so sorry. Okay.
No, it's okay. But you get the idea.
Okay.
I think you get the idea.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna have so much guilt.
No guilt.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. So, well, I mean, let's take maybe a second to talk about why we put these. Just we had all these conversations about how we build music and video. And so I'm curious, this idea of collage, kind of just if we can talk a bit about that, just as a starting point, or is it a starting point, or is it the wanted result at the end?
Yeah, it's kind of both. I feel like we were kind of talking about that before.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm always kind of collaborating with myself,
Mm-hmm.
former versions of myself and things that I recorded when I was much younger, along with things that I have done 2 days ago, right,
Mm-hmm.
across time, and also from different sources.
Mm-hmm.
And through that collaging, I feel like I find my own kind of voice is through all, I am the filter of all of those things.
Yes. Yeah.
We were kind of talking about that,
Yeah.
how it seems we'll get to that later, but how
Yeah.
all these things that seem like chaos actually have an internal logic
Yeah.
that we're kind of developing. I feel like that
Mm-hmm.
resonates with you too.
Yeah, and I feel like there's something about taking things from the outside, processing them till they feel like yours, because you kind of maybe put them, just through reversing, or sometimes something as simple as manipulating, sometimes completely becoming unrecognizable. And so I'm curious, when does it feel like it's yours?
Yeah, and right,
When-
we were
when-
talking about that, and we're when it can't be
Yeah.
recognized as
Yeah.
anything, it sort of sits in this really super hyperliminal place where it's not that, and it's not that, and it's not that, and it's not that, and it becomes its own thing.
But do you want people
Yeah.
to recognize your references?
I don't mind it.
Or at least
I don't mind it.
maybe not like, oh, like this came from this, but like the type of sound, right? Like you can recognize this like sounds like something that was recorded at a family party, or this sounds like a song that was sampled, or do you care
Exactly.
about
Yeah, I like that because that evokes a feeling when it's like more abstract. I don't know, that becomes more universally felt somehow. But when it's too hyper specific, then it's too close. I feel like I can't find my own place within it, you know?
within specificity?
Yeah, if it's too close to, you know, if it sounds too much like this album, or if it sounds too much like this thing, or too much like that thing. I don't know, I feel safety in just kind of like being in my own private space that has its own logic outside of whatever else is there.
Yeah, I love that about your music, that I'm like, I'm always curious what song has the most plays in an artist's Spotify. And I mean, I'm just like, what does it say, you know? And like, and the one for you is like the one that has maybe the most, not even, you know, but like pop structure, like just like the structure to make it on pop radio, whatever, like format, you know. And or like at least it starts like that. But what I like about your music is that like I feel like maybe I like it and I say that and it's or just I recognize something, an impulse, where whenever it gets too much of like too obviously like categorizable, you erase. Right? Like I feel like you start doing something and then all of a sudden that was too pretty, and then you'll have like a kind of noisy, you know what I mean? Like, and it's kind of like this erasure. And I'm not saying you're defining your style by refusing everything, because that's nihilistic in a way that I don't recognize in your music. Your music is very open-hearted, which I love.
I appreciate that.
I mean, that's to me it's the most important, is like when something is full-hearted and not sarcastic, you know? And like I can tell that it is like so much, it's very genuine. And so then I'm like, oh, then I'm gonna give it the time of day because it's genuine and also it's gorgeous. But in this way that really has many moments, and like I feel like you're an editor. You know, there's like emotionally, there's like you give us something very melodic for a certain amount of time, and then you stop, and it's kind of like it feels like a narrative. Like there's like you recorded someone saying something, but at the same time it's also abstract. That I don't feel like you're dictating a kind of like very defined world onto me. You know, there's like an abstraction that makes it so that I can listen to a lot of the songs and always have a different experience.
I feel like that's how we connect, is through the editing process. Like I really feel like a deep connection with you there. It's like video editing is so similar to sound editing in so many ways. It just like is the same.
Yeah.
I feel like you have like a similar kind of like logic or pace with the way that you edit video too.
Yeah, I would call it hyperactive. Yeah. But I think it's like, it's not that I refuse to, I mean, maybe I don't want to be categorized, but that's more like maybe on a cultural specificity level. But I feel like it's more like I'm like abusing genres, or I'm like, right now this scene would be way more efficient if it was edited the way that I learned watching reality TV. And so I'll just do that. But then I'll be like, bye. And like I'll like be like, this scene is gonna be very different, and the reference is Fantasia. And it's like whatever is gonna make it work with that, what I have in mind, of hitting that note that I have in mind. Yeah. So
I love that phrase, abusing genres. That's really useful. That's
yeah,
so
I'm like,
great.
come here. Yeah. So okay, I can show this because this was just my direct reaction to being like, I told you this is the closest I felt to a DJ, or like a music producer, because this was a sequence I filmed in a film called Tirham Hafeda in 2017, and then there's this dance sequence and I didn't know what to do with it, because I felt like, you know, sometimes with video and sound you can achieve a new dimension that feels magical, and sometimes it just takes going slower or reversing, which is very much like, I feel like a practice that is more obvious with sound. So I slowed this down, and the music got so beautiful, in my opinion. you'll tell me. And then there's an effect on the dancer, you'll see, but
studio so much.
Stuff here. Well, also, this is, it wasn't just gratuitous. It was like, in the moment, there's like, the stories about intergenerational drama between two women performers. And then I felt like it was a moment in the video when we needed a break from dialogue and drama. So that was the decision, is to like have a little, yeah.
What I love too is I feel like you have such a sense of reverence, and also there's a lot of beauty, but also humor, and you combine all these different things, and I'm feeling all of them at the same time when I'm watching and like engaging with your work. And that's what I hope for in my music, but it's so visceral, and I feel like especially humor, like you just like have such a, like it's so beautifully executed, and it like combines all these other feelings in such a like really complex and incredible way. I feel like that's also like a really great example of that.
Thanks for saying that. Actually, I just thought about something. How do you bring humor into music without being like an SNL track, you know what I mean? Like, how do you do that? That's really hard.
It's hard. People do it, and I kind of like watch them with a lot of awe because it's really hard. I mean, I try. It's really funny. Someone on my team once told me that they were like afraid to meet me because they thought I would be really serious, because they're like, your music is so serious. But to me, it's like really not. Like, and there are all these recordings of like my mom talking about like dog poop, and like my roommate just like singing ridiculous songs. I like put those in there because I'm like, yeah, it's not that serious. There's a lot of other things going on when something serious is happening, or you're grieving, or you're like really happy. Like you can feel all these things at once. But like it's so visceral with your work, though. I really like feel it. But like the humor is like the thing that really ties all of those emotions together, and really, it's just amazing.
Thanks for saying that. This is we're talking about an example of collage. Do you want to?
Oh yeah, I think I know what it is, but maybe we should play it first.
Yeah.
I was trying to count how many different sources there were in there. There's like maybe like 6 or 7, I think, of like, I collect baby toys because I think they sound really great, and I like the sound because they're like, it has a really like degraded sound, but also feels like kind of nostalgic. So there's some of that in there that I like manipulated and reversed and slowed down, and then I like made up a hand clap. Like a hand clapping game with my friends, and then also sampled one, and there's just like a bunch of different things that I've like collected over time. Like some of them are, I just had an idea in the studio, and some of them are like really, really old. But yeah, I'm realizing there's a lot of baby toys in that collage.
So you're just like playing with different things you recorded and putting,
Yeah, I sometimes will like find these collages that I forget that I even made, but I'm like, oh right, I remember this sound. I sort of like the sounds bring me back to the moments, because I'm like, oh yeah, I remember the sound of this toy, or I remember the sound of like making this up, or I remember that time that I was with my friend and they said something crazy, and like that all kind of like brings me back. Like I don't really remember making this at all, but I remember the different sources of it.
Yeah, they're referential.
Yeah.
Like you don't need to remember making it because the sounds are about the make.
And the sounds are about the memory too, because I don't remember anything. So
I also have a really bad memory. It's so scary.
It's really scary.
Yeah. Well, again, in response to you sharing a collage, I wanted to show how, in like a lot of my films, like the world building and the storytelling is like missing all these elements that are completely unrelated and making sense of them together. So there's this Iraqi track that I really love that has all these car horns that I listened to, and I didn't make anything of it at the time.
So good.
And and then I was supposed to shoot this film in a water sanitation station. So it's like a speculative sci-fi film, happens in the future on an island called the Caps. And there's going to be a protest that has to do with resources. And I was going to shoot in this water sanitation station the morning of they told us we couldn't. And so the only other location that was possible to film to was this unfinished car dealership that it was at the entrance of Marrakesh, and I took a random photo of it because it looks weird. And so we found the owner, and they're like, yeah, you can film here. So then it was like, okay, it's about cars. The protest is about cars. And I thought about that song. And then the casting was, I'll show you all the separate parts. And then the casting was Kamel and Amin, were just two great rappers in Marrakesh. I'll show you a bit of them. Okay, and then it became like, okay, so there's Amin who has the long hair, he lives on the Caps, and he makes this music that, you know, like at that time, car horns are vintage, because it's in the future, so he sampled car horns to make a new music genre, and that's his dad on the left, and he's like dragging him to a protest at the car dealership. And so here's a bit of it.
What it? شنو؟ انتوا بعد ما تعطوا الموسيقى ديالي ديما مخدمين طراقاتنا في الارسكي بايكس ديالهم باش يطلعوا علينا. وخرا عندهم الاكسس للانترنت كامل تروبرز كيحماقوا على جهتنا ديال الويب. يو الدراري معكم امين والساوند تاع كلاكسون احسن واحد في الكابس اليوم نضرب التراك ديال الاستاذ ما تنساوش تشوفوه ديروا معكم لايك وسبسكرايب. بعض المرات فاش شي دروبر كيتكونيكتا في النيتورك ديالنا شي كابسي كيهاكي تسمعو غاد انفينيت ويندو ديال انترناشونال داتا كيجي بشي برنامج من داك العالم ميوزيك فيديوز شي خطاب ديال الرئيس كيابلوديو في السيرفر ديالنا بلا حتى ما يشوفو. اغلبية ديال المرات كنلقاو شي لعيبات مخصهمش يكونو تما. تخيل شعب على قدو subjected to the user profile البوليس ديال الهجرة أمريكانيين هورني ولونلي.
A Chevy family cruise for $189 a month? A Ford EX2S for $249 a month? A Ford Wormhole SO9 for $219 a month? All on the Caps? Atlantic Cars wants you to get a new whip at your doorstep and save on mainland delivery fees now. Take your pick from the biggest car stock on the Caps with a 20% trooper discount. Don't miss our huge grand opening sale. Atlantic Cars. Nobody does more for you on the Caps.
But the protesters are arriving, and that's the car dealership.
Oh, your editing is so musical. You can almost always tell when people work in video if they like music or listen to music or are musicians. You can like almost always tell. Your edits are like extremely musical. It's interesting. It has like the same kind of logic to me. I can like see that.
I start with music. So yeah. I'm glad you see. Yeah, like I mean, this was scored by Fatima Qadiri, but before she made the score, I can only start editing if I know the mood and the world. and then I added to it. Not always, because that can be dangerous, but
Yeah.
that's kind of the starting point.
Yeah, it really comes across.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
So this is your track, but it's my slide. I wanted to talk about this track because this is a track on your album, and there's something in it that I think is so beautiful, so crazy, and it relates to the horns. So I'm just gonna play it. I feel like, and then like I sent you that video because I was like, wait, where does it comes from? 60s, 70s dance hall. Then it was popularized again by like a New York DJ, and now it's like we all recognize the song. But I never heard it in this context, and I feel like that's like the coolest thing you can do with your music or art, is that it's like something that is so familiar. We know it in one context, but then you're playing it, you're just making it me hear it, like it becomes this very like poetic sound, like very beautiful, very like just like very emotional. It has like a completely different existence with the recontextualization. And I was like, that's the best last slide to the repurposing collaging chapter.
Thanks. A lot of people hate it on the internet apparently, which I think is really funny. Because we were in the studio and we put those in and we were just like would die of laughter every time we heard it. We're like, this is ridiculous. Like why did we do this? But that's
like
yeah, so we're going for it.
Moment now. It's like so yeah. The new chapter is chaos and precision.
Yeah, I guess we were talking a lot about world building and how in the process of collecting all these materials and repurposing them, that, you know, it can seem very chaotic, but actually there is a very kind of precise internal logic that develops, and an artistic voice and a point of view through, you know, despite the seeming chaos. And that just made me think a lot about how that kind of manifests in my work in some ways, where in this particular example, there was a song on my first record that we ended up playing live a lot in a completely different way, and then ended up re-recording based on the live part of it. So it's kind of like these songs that seem like they have nothing to do with each other, but actually they have the same chordal structure, very similar melody, a lot, you know, same sentiment behind it. A lot of the things are the same, but it seems like they're completely unrelated. So yeah, we play the.
I'm scared because.
Oh yeah.
Let's try. You tell me if it's
It's good.
So
Yeah, now I get it. Now you can do the second one. Same chords, same words, same melody, but in two very different contexts that kind of pulls it together.
Yeah, it feels so different.
Yeah.
So how is your like life? What is like your life setup? How do you work the tracks and stuff?
Yeah, it's completely different. In my mind, it's like the recording is like it's the text. It's like the real thing from which everything else sprouts, and then the live show is a way to really bring in lots of collaborators, and it's kind of collaborated from the ground up in a way that the records aren't, because I'm like it starts with me writing alone, and yeah, I have a lot of collaborators for the live show, and they really bring a lot of themselves to the live experience. So it's like funny listening to this now, because I'm like, oh yeah, it started with us just kind of doing this live, and that's how it like evolved into this.
But can you tell us a bit how the tracks that are on the album, how you work?
Oh yeah, we just start with listening really, and I will kind of teach parts to people. They kind of play, we kind of know instruments they're gonna play, but not necessarily. And then they'll kind of have their spin on it, because we won't have the same effects, we won't have the same pedals, we don't have the same equipment. So they'll kind of like do an interpretation of it. And then we'll kind of see where the gaps are. We're like, okay, what parts are missing? Is that essential? Like, do we need to add another person? Do we need to add a sample? Do we need to re-envision the parts? But it's really organic in that way. And it's kind of cool because it allows me to rethink the songs in a way where I'm like, okay, what's actually essential to have this come across? But the live context is just so different in a lot of ways. And there's just like physical limitations because we try not to perform with any tracks or anything, which is more of like, it's all live. Wow. And that's kind of just like a intellectual thing. There are a lot of people like, I don't like computers, that's lame. And like, that is a lame thing to say, I think, actually, because like, if I have a pedal board, because if I have like a bunch of pedals, it's just a bunch of little computers, essentially, it's the same thing. But for us, it's more just like, okay, what can we do like together and as live as we can? Like it's a fun constraint, or like, okay, like what can we do with these hands and beat that we have and the equipment that we have right now.
Mm-hmm. So what do you do with all the samples and the voice memos and
what we've been incorporating it more. Usually it happens as like a transition. Sometimes we'll play them, sometimes we'll try to recreate them, and now we've been using like a 404 sampler to try to like manipulate them live to make them something else, or we've been recording rehearsals and like making new samples that we use in live settings based on like what we've been rehearsing, which is really fun. So that's another like weird Mobius strip going on.
Do you dance?
No.
I've never seen you live. Do you play the guitar, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, what do you do with your body on the stage?
I used to sit a lot, and then I finally was like, okay, now I can stand. I used to make the audience sit because I feel like venue spaces can be really weird. And so I wanted to kind of make them something else. And when you tell people to do things, they get really freaked out. And then they have to like, there's a lot of like internal things that happen when you establish a relationship with an audience from the beginning. And so that was really fun. I would somehow get them to sit without talking. So they'd have to like figure out what I was trying to get them to do. And then they're like, you want me to do that? And somehow that worked to establish a relationship with the audience, but I would sit. But then I started standing, and then I broke my foot, so I'm gonna be sitting for a while.
Yeah, I just wondered that, like, do you think of your music as it will make you happy that it's a music people dance to?
I feel like I haven't. That's not a priority for me yet. But yet. I hope. Mostly, I just want people to have like a different kind of experience. I feel like I'm reacting a lot to just like the space that my work is being performed in and shown in, which is like clubs, you know, and it's great. But also, I just wonder if there's another reality. So I feel like I'm kind of like giving a little bit of like a fuck you to like clubs a little bit, being like, you're gonna sit and you're not gonna be on your phone or I'm gonna glare at you from the stage. Yeah, sometimes. It's a little intense, I guess, the performances. But it's cool. But I want it to feel like something else. Like you're sort of like disoriented for a minute, and it's like I try not to play that long. I try to make my albums really short because it's just like we're here. It's all about like our connection. So like I need you to be here, and actually like the audience is a huge important part of that exchange. Like I can't do what I do if you aren't like there with me, and supposedly you're here to be with me, so I'm gonna make you be with me and be present.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I don't do any performance, and I really admire the ability to be there. Like I'm hiding behind videos. I don't even act. I'm like an animator. So.
But I feel like your videos have like a like real reverence for performance and performing. Like that feels like a really big part of. I don't know. I see that in your work.
I think I'm very fascinated by performative people, and I film them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of like I keep trying to respond to each other, right, in the slides. So I was thinking the closest to live performance that I get is that's my installation. So the videos I make, I usually show them in multiple channel installations. And the cool / exhausting thing is that every time I show them, I have to redraw the whole installation to be site specific. So I was going to show an example of like, that's all the same project, for example. The first time I showed it, I'm probably hiding it, but it was inside these sculptures, and then I got an opportunity to show it again, and I was like, I actually spent so much work on the film itself. It's 40 minutes, so it's not really fun to see it through these outdoors sculptures, and so I did like a multiple channel like indoor installation, but there's kind of like some of the same vocabulary of using these like landscaping elements and playing with the goggle shape. So it's like kind of like the two tracks you played. You're like they're the same. They're just kind of like two dimensions. Like they're all each in a different dimension. And so I think that's a similar kind of like part of our brain. Or like maybe it's like the idea that there are rules, and then within that you stretch, and then there's space between the different rules, and within that space there's a lot of freedom for things to be polymorphous so that's just a little response. And then so what we've been talking about a lot is this idea of syntax, right? It's like it seems like we have a lot of different references, and there's like a kind of like maybe a chaotic aspect to all the references and the rhythm and the different sounds, but really, at least I'll speak for myself, to not put any words in your mouth, but I think for me there's certain kind of like necessity of escaping categorization, and I think that has come a lot from first not feeling a strong connection to one category, but also kind of like having more loyalty for storytelling and emotion and the people I film than to any kind of like pre-existing historical traditions, while having so much respect for all these traditions. Don't get me wrong, I'm not like, but kind of just being like, so and it gives me a freedom that, whenever it feels like in between those categories, it feels like a sweet spot, and I feel like more comfortable.
Yes. I totally agree with that. I mean, in music, I feel like, I don't know, genres are just kind of like racist and sexist a lot of the time, actually. Like I feel like I always talk about this, but like I think about hip hop all the time as being like the most experimental genre, right? And like I think, I don't know, people have a hard time like categorizing like certain types of people in a certain kind of way, right? So like music that would be like hyper experimental, that does all these things and uses a lot of tools that really relate to music in other contexts, gets kind of like overlooked in that way and like put in a box when like it's not, it doesn't just belong in that box, it belongs in so many different places. Mm-hmm. So yeah, for me it feels safer just kind of like just like screw the box, I'm just gonna be in my own little world.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. And also different languages, you know, like if you think of different music genres as like language, if you think about different types of image making, video making, TV, blah, 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 they come from a certain logic. A certain logic is a certain cultural way of like organizing ideas based on certain sets of historical and political beliefs. And then it's really important, like the second you realize that, you realize that like the most, at least for me, the ones that were taught to me are not even emerging from my culture. I was French taught, now I live in America, but I'm Moroccan, and so I think it's been really cool for me to like look at things like Shabi music in Morocco and how that BPM actually does really like, I love that music and it does influence how fast I edit like my cuts. And how it's a type of music that is so cool because it evolves with time. Like autotune happened, now there's autotune in every track. Like there's keyboard, so now we're gonna sample instruments. Sometimes there's a horse sample. And if that works, I'm serious, yes. it works. That's the vibe. So I think this kind of like openness to everything, because it becomes in the genre, it becomes processed and it belongs to it. Basically your horn, your air horn, is like something that I learned a lot from, that I feel more familiarity and identification with than editing logic that is inherited from being taught editing, which is very charged in itself, like, because it's like, what is the story? What is the logic of a story? Storytelling is, very political in its organization. Yeah,
I feel like people process in that way too. I feel like a lot of people would relate to that, or like a lot of people listen to a lot of different genres, right? Mm-hmm. But you know, like the genre is like hyperimposed in a way.
And also in music, it's so commercial. The idea of like just like wrapping things up in a category, which must be very annoying.
It's very annoying.
Yeah. I don't know how we're doing on times because I can skip some stuff. Reese?
Like 5-10 minutes.
Okay, because we want to have conversation with people. So I'm gonna skip this slide, and we maybe can go to the last chapter.
Yeah. We were just talking about care, how like a lot of this kind of, you know, we have a lot of sources, we get material from a lot of different sources, and that it really kind of comes from a place of care, and that there is a sense of intimacy, both in like the capturing process sometimes, or in just like, you know, the moment that we're capturing, and that we both kind of felt a kinship there.
He's looking like it's like
for time, maybe just the first one, maybe.
Okay, the first one on this one.
If it's not, I don't remember.
Happy birthday.
No, maybe not that one.
Happy birthday to you.
I like DJ.
I know.
This
maybe,
one?
Maybe the second one.
This one?
Maybe. Oh, not that one. That one maybe?
Wasting time.
Oh, yeah.
Not making money. Not learning nothing new. No. This year you can make it up. You can learn how to drive. Mm-hmm. You can get your license. You can get a little hoopty. You know, I don't want to tell you to go to the dealer and get a. Everybody got to start with a hoopty. You need to learn how to park. You need to learn how to do basic things. You know.
Yeah.
Because if you go and get an Audi and you don't know how to change your tire and you don't know how to park, you're going to mess it up. Like, everybody got to start with a hoopty. Yeah, why not?
Yes, it's true.
a beater.
Yep.
And then you park, you hit the other cars, you don't care. As long as it's mechanically good, that's it. You have kids?
I don't.
That I'm not gonna tell you nothing about. You gotta be married before you have kids. That's what my father told me. I waited until I was 30 to have my kids.
Really?
And I swear, I'm 42, my daughter's gonna be 12.
Yeah, wow.
And my son is gonna be 11. Boom, boom, back to back. Done.
Anyway, you can stop it.
12 and 11. All of them.
But I found that like I would get into these like really intimate conversations with people, like especially, you know, I take a lot of cars to be able to move equipment to get to gigs and stuff like that, and I would just find myself in these conversations with people where I get kind of to the core of what they're thinking about, like these really fleeting intimate moments. And I kept returning to them and wanting to like capture them because there's something really beautiful about that. Just like in this moment where like I don't know this person, I don't know their name, I will never see them ever again. But we're having these conversations about just like really, you know, things that are really important to us. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. And do you go back to these? Like, did you ever work with this sample?
I haven't yet, but I love it. I listen to it every like few months, I feel like. And it's just so funny. It's really beautiful. That specific one, because he also like he goes back and he just talks about how much he loves his kids and how like he loves just like hugging them and how he just like almost can like feel them growing and how he like sees just like really just deep stuff. And it's just really beautiful that this person just felt like he wanted to open up to me about this, and I had like such a connection with him. So yeah, maybe one day, but also, you know, there's an ethics to it too, where I don't want to feel like I'm like exploiting people's experiences, but I really just recorded it because I just like loved this guy. He was just really cool.
Yeah, he sounds cool. And I was wondering, thinking of that, like when you say ethics, like would you use it, or like do you talk to people before using their samples, or how does it work for you?
Now I am when I don't ask people, it's when I kind of know that it'll be okay, or they know what's going on. A lot of them are like sort of group vocals and things like that, where like the one where I think it's Salome, it might not be Salome. I have no idea. It was just a bunch of people. Things like that. There are other times where I just like would never use a sample. The other times where it's like kind of sticky and it's important to just work through the stickiness and talk to them and just be really transparent and open and figure it out. Mm-hmm. And like compensate people and whatever, you know, but it never like comes from that place. So that's always weird, the transition from like just a diary to like using something in an artwork to there being any sort of like public aspect to it, because it never starts from that place, but that is a transformation, and so I'm figuring out how to honor those transformations and make sure that the people who are affected are aware and in the loop, and that is also a form of care, is figuring out how to make sure people like don't feel like they're being exploited.
It's funny you said the people that are affected, as if it was like that shows that you're so thoughtful and respectful. I'm like, they're lucky, but yeah, I mean, obviously depending on the whatever they're saying, and I know there's emotional moments. Well, speaking of that, yeah, like most of my films have like mostly a documentary, like a starting point, but I also work a lot with my family, or I cast people that I know, and so I do think about that a lot, right? I think one big reason why I like working with my family, or people that I owe something to emotionally or love, is that I think that I have, you know, the whole like conversations around documentary ethics, they're always so cold. It's always like this like very contractual thing, and it almost feels like the filmmaker is bummed they can't. You know, it's almost like a rule not to break, but if it's like someone you love, it functions at a different level. It's like you want to show like how you look at them. Basically, you want to translate that. I don't have the vocabulary in, like, I can't do that with language as precisely as I can do it with video. That goes back to our chaos and precision. Like, I think like we do what we do with these different tools because it's like the best way that we get to a precise notion of something that we feel. But something I've been thinking about a lot is also the dangerous aspect of documentaries, how it often tries to kind of have aesthetics of like full realism when it's actually completely constructed. And so a lot of kind of like what I try to do is to make it so obvious that I manipulated the image, and that's kind of like maybe an idea for proposal for a new type of transparency. It's like, yes, I did edit this. I was going to show a little clip where I filmed my mom's cousin in a film called Rabat, where I asked some women in my family, mostly middle-aged women, about sex and love.
أنا السيدة بالجناواتي المواليد 24 فبراير 1955 مدينة مكناس. أكشن. من الهوايات ديالي كنحب الصوت. ملي كنت صغيرة وليت ننزلو الطوموبيلات وتمشي بهم تنحمق على حساب فونتيغ شي حاجة سميتها المغامرات تنفوت عليها. تعجبني يكون جو هادئ، تتعجبني الرومانسية بزاف ماشي شوية.
الأفلام ولا في الحياة؟
في الحياة.
It says thank you. It says thank you in the bottom for the people in the bottom.
The smiley face.
So now maybe we open it up to questions.
Yeah, so Angela said 3 days ago that she had a question. Do you know each other?
Yeah.
We're acquainted. I'm Angela. I'm a big fan of both of your work. Thanks for sharing. I'm just gonna. Can you hear me? Yeah.
I have an extra mic. That's over.
I'm gonna use no mic. But yeah, thank you for all of that. I feel like that was really generous and adorable about how it was a conversation. And thanks for allowing us to be a part of that conversation. I was really inspired by, you use so many different modes of inspiration for your work, both of you. You talk about race and you talk about gender in a way that it doesn't feel didactic, it feels really textural. And when you mention abusing genres and how genres also can be sexist, racist, etc., it made me think about my own practice, where I really think about trying to break down senses, and senses being genres in themselves. Because I work a lot in the ephemeral as a cook, and I'm wondering if, for me, I have a lot of profound experiences being inspired by visuals and auditory experiences like what you both do. And I'm wondering if you have examples or stories about being inspired by taste or smell or touch.
Ooh, that's a really good question.
I'm like, you're trying to
Before I perform, as I have a lot of anxiety, I always have some sort of scent with me, and it's usually something that a friend has given me, I'm realizing. It's never something I've done myself, which there's probably something there too. And it's always like a spray bottle, because venues get weird about fire, and that's fair. But I always spray it, and it's always on stage, because I feel like I need to just like figure out who's in the audience somehow. But it's really important. I can't perform without it. I need the scent there. I need like a moment on the stage to just like absorb it and like physically spray my area, and then every single person in the band's area, and everyone's like, what is that? Or like, it smells good, what is it? But yeah, it's really important to me. I'm so glad you asked that question.
Well, one thought that I had was that even in my work, I feel like it's difficult with smell. I feel like there's a feminization of smell, or maybe stigmas around smell. So I could see that being grounded in your practice.
Totally, yeah. It's always weird in a venue too, because like, depending on how big it is, like it really is just for me. But sometimes the audience just like it like wafts over there, so like they kind of get it anyway. And it's interesting. They're like, "Oh, what is that?" Then it becomes this whole thing. But I'm like, I don't know. I don't need to explain it. It's just for me because I'm really anxious and it helps me.
What does it smell like?
It's a little bit woody, sometimes a little bit floral, but mostly just like very earthy. Earthy smells help me.
I'm like, I want a glass of wine. That sounds great. Yeah, that's cool. I feel like when I smell things, I'm very sensitive to smell, but it doesn't go in the part of my brain that makes art. It's more sensual or like related to people and like, you know, like my aunt's smell or something, and like, or someone I like, you know. So it's like very like in that part of my brain that's not very articulate. But taste is a big thing. More like because I'm on the computer, like this is all computer generated stuff, I cook in between, and I think that is part of the routine of making work. So I love cooking and eating.
Yeah, food is very important to music making.
I bet.
Any other questions? There's one back here. In the aisle.
Hi, thank you so much for this conversation and thank you for hosting us. My question is about your workspaces and like kind of where you do your creative work. Like, you know, I know that this is sort of computer generated work, so I'm kind of curious if you separate like your creative spaces from your living space. You know, like do you have a studio? But also maybe just like if you could just talk more about the spaces that you're creative in, I would love to hear about it.
Can I just ask really quick if we could turn on the lights so that we can see everyone? Because we're...
Yeah. Good call. Oh, yeah. Oh, should I go first? I love writing in my bed.
Yeah.
That's pretty much where I'm the most productive. I need to be extremely comfortable. I feel like most of my work is done in my bed or like lounging on a couch. Yeah.
That's cool. I'm incapable of chilling and working, and like I love a desk. But I don't have a studio. I work from home, and I also love that because I take naps. So I like to be in a cozy space. I don't really like cold work or like industrial studio space. I feel like it needs to be at home. And then the filming obviously happens on location, but most of the process is just on the computer.
Yeah. I guess I also used to have a very demanding full-time job, so on top of making work, so I would make a lot of work or think about a lot of work on the train. That was really useful, where I just like whenever I had any alone time, I was like, okay, I need to think about this, and like that was my time, like 30 minutes to get to work. I was like, we're gonna figure this out. Or like coming home or going on walks after work and things like that. I got really good at just kind of like fitting it in where I could and like finding inspiration from the things around me, so I wouldn't have to just like be in a like a very controlled environment to be able to do it. But my favorite space is still my bed.
When you think about writing music, like it's all in your head?
It's not all in my head. A lot of it is very like tactile, but like a lot of melodies will come to me on the train, or words, or like a chord progression or something I want to think about and play with later, things like that.
Then you record it?
Yeah, exactly. And I have to record it to remember it, so that when I have time to actually go to it, I know what I was thinking.
Do you get shy on the train, or are you just like?
I mean, it looks kind. I'm sure I look crazy a lot of the time, but masks have helped because no one knows what's going on. I can like sing to myself, and no one knows.
Yeah.
One question over here on the right side. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this talk. It's so inspiring hearing you talk about both of your practices and like how they speak to each other. I guess like I'm wondering, like, do you schedule time in your day to like work on things, or is it kind of more spontaneous, like whenever like the mood strikes you? And also, like, are you working on different things at one time, or is it kind of like you see one project's completion and then start on the next?
Ooh, I am figuring that out now because I am mostly focusing on my artistic practice now. So I'm trying to figure out how to schedule my days, and it's a real work in progress. And I don't really, I have to be thinking about a lot of things at once because there's like a lot of due dates. So I kind of have to figure out and prioritize. And you know, if one project can feed into another, I try to let that happen. But a lot of times it's just like completely separate things. Also, specifically, I feel like recording and live music are very different processes, and the live recording is so collaborative that I have to like schedule with other people, and I'm like, okay, this is my time to work on the live show, or I have to like prepare this before we get to rehearsal so that I know what to tell the band or I know what to give them. But yeah, figuring that out. I wish it were more organic, but I can't be.
I had just a question, follow-up on that. Do you listen to music?
Yeah, I'm trying to get better at like making myself do it more. I had like an NTS radio show, so that really helped. I was like, okay, I really gotta like listen to stuff. I just have like a big playlist of stuff I have to listen to, and anytime someone mentions anything I've never heard of, I'm like, okay, that's going in the playlist. And then just like, whenever I have time, I just go through it.
Does it get confusing in moments where you're really like in the writing process?
I try to separate it, and it gets overwhelming, definitely. Because I'm like, that's too much input.
Do you remember how Jamiroquai was like, I never listened to the radio my whole life. I was like, I heard that as a teenager, and I was like, wow, that's so crazy. I don't believe it.
No, like how you
like also there's so many references in his,
yeah,
just like, yeah.
You can't like make music if you don't listen to music. That's just not a thing you can do.
He wanted us to think he was a genius.
Yeah, it's just a weird thing to do. It's like being a writer without reading. Like, what is that?
Yeah. I think I do have a routine in a way, because I've been doing that now for a few years. And, you know, sometimes if I'm really excited, I will work at night or the weekend, but I do think I take my nights off and my weekends mostly. And I have days that I'm trying to assign to like more bureaucratic email stuff and Zooms instead of, and then have days that I leave up for myself all day, because I realize that if I had Zooms in the morning, then like to get back into a space that feels, you know, like not distracted. But I always go from one project to another like 4 times a day. And I really want to stop doing that, and I hope I can work on only one thing for a couple of years. Because I think I would be bored, or maybe it would be amazing because I wouldn't exhaust myself with the transitions.
That's interesting. That's it. I've been feeling that I've been wanting to slow down a little bit, the process of like the, you know, what I'm working on when, just to try it out. I feel like I would also maybe get bored, but there's something really nice about just dedicating your time to one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds cool.
Okay, we have time for one more question. So I think there's a hand up here in the back.
Hi. I'm wondering, in like working with really personal materials, like interviewing your family members and, you know, recordings of conversations with people around you, what are kind of their relationship to your work that exists in the more experimental space that can be sometimes maybe Western facing, if that makes sense. And then on another note, if like where does humor and kind of collaging and abstraction come in that? Like it's if there is like a coping mechanism like for as like a disguise for like maybe very personal confrontations with like the cultural and like family spaces. Yeah, it's not a very formulated question. Sorry.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Well, I'll say for my family, like they have fun doing it. And it's funny because there's so much focus on my mom because she's in a lot of my films, and like I feel like I always talk about her in this like how she participates in the films, and she's actually like one of the main characters in this series that I've done, and then like I'm doing a book about it, and they're like, oh, like we want you to have a conversation with your mom. It's like a huge thing. And the first question I'm like, so mom, like remember when we did that shoot and stuff? I want to talk about that. She's like, what? Like she didn't remember what the story was, what anything was. She was like, I haven't seen the video. I'm like, I sent it to you. Like did not care, kind of. And I think it's because for her, she's like, she loves performing in the moment. But then, yeah, I don't think she cares. I don't know. She's like wants me to make art, but like she's not like yeah. But so for the relationship, like I think the humor, it's not like I film people and then I slap this humor onto it. I think the humor is inspired by the people I'm filming. It's like honoring their sense of humor. A lot of the people, like my mom, for example, she knows my humor. So like if she's in my videos, she'll like linger on the things she'll know I'll be into. So you know what I mean? It's like. It's more like it transpires because it's already there, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to that too. I feel like the sort of the moments of levity in my work kind of come through my relationship with other people. Like my mom talking about the dog poop or whatever, or my roommate like making a ridiculous song. And I also hope that that's also like a way that makes it more relatable, that I don't want to be alienating to anyone. Even if I'm playing around with different structures and stuff like that, which is why, like, you know, I don't know, experimental is always like a difficult word sometimes, but that's why I always think about like hip hop and other genres where it's like, yeah, that's extremely experimental. It just like gets categorized another way, right? But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but
Well, thank you so much, Taja and Meriem. This has been really incredible. It was kind of an experiment, and I think it went amazingly, better than we could have expected. Thank you all so much for coming. I know for many of you, this is your first time here in ONX. Please join us again as we do more of these. The next will feature Kaya Wilkins and Austin Lee on May 27th. And yeah, thank you so much, Meriem and Taja. We have drinks over here. Please stay and enjoy the space.
So